The fluorescent lights in Brandon Lattimore's office were buzzing the way they always did when the building's electrical system was under strain. He sat across from me with his legs crossed, scrolling through something on his tablet while my performance binder sat unopened between us. 6 years of documented results, client testimonials, and system architecture blueprints that I had spent 2 weeks compiling, and this man had not even cracked the cover. "I appreciate you putting this together, Dean," Brandon said without looking up. "But we have decided to go in a different direction for the infrastructure director role. Preston Miller will be stepping into the position starting next quarter. We think his fresh perspective and modern cloud-first approach is what the department needs." Preston Miller, 29 years old, had been at Ridgewater Financial for only 11 months. He could not tell you the difference between a load balancer and a lunch break if his quarterly bonus depended on it. But he had a Stanford computer science degree, a wardrobe that looked like a tech startup catalog, and the kind of confidence that comes from never having been responsible for anything that actually mattered. I kept my expression steady. 18 years in the Army teaches you that. When you have sat across from a commanding officer telling you your squad is being redeployed to Fallujah for a third rotation, some vice president in a slim fit blazer does not exactly rattle your composure. "Understood," I said. "I appreciate you letting me know." Brandon finally looked up, clearly relieved I was not making a scene. "Great, glad we are aligned. Oh, and the Meridian Bank migration is still on track for this weekend, right? Their chief technology officer has been calling me directly, which is a little uncomfortable. I need you to make sure that goes flawlessly." I picked up my binder and walked out. My name is Dean Vance. I am 52 years old, and for 6 years I was the person who kept Ridgewater Financial's entire technology infrastructure from collapsing. I was not the person who presented at board meetings. I was the one who answered the phone at 2 in the morning when servers crashed, who rebuilt our disaster recovery systems from scratch after the previous director quit mid-contract, and who personally maintained relationships with every major banking client that trusted us with their data. I came to Ridgewater after my Army career ended and my marriage ended with it. Diane could not take another deployment, another missed anniversary, another phone call at midnight pulling me away from our daughter's life. The divorce was clean, but it gutted me. Paige was 12 when I signed the papers, and the look on her face when I explained that her father was going to have a different house now still wakes me up some nights. I needed stability, regular hours, good health insurance, and a paycheck that could cover child support and still let me save for Paige's future. The Army had trained me as a signals intelligence specialist, which in civilian terms meant I understood networks, encryption, and infrastructure at a level most corporate information technology people never reach. When you are responsible for communication systems in a combat zone, you learn that redundancy is not optional and downtime can cost lives. The stakes are different in corporate America, sure, but the discipline transfers perfectly. Ridgewater was a disaster when I started. Their previous director had been running the infrastructure like a personal fiefdom. There was no documentation, no standardized procedures, and passwords were stored in a spreadsheet on his desktop that nobody else could access. When he left, he took every piece of institutional knowledge with him, and the company was hemorrhaging clients because systems kept failing. I spent my first 8 months working 16-hour days, rebuilt the entire network architecture from the ground up, documented every single process, and created runbooks for every scenario. I established monitoring systems that could predict failures before they happened, and wrote a 400-page technical operations manual that covered everything from routine maintenance to catastrophic failure recovery. I organized the whole thing the way we did field manuals in the Army. Because when things go wrong at 3 in the morning, you need to find answers fast. The Meridian Bank account was our crown jewel, a $22 million annual contract to manage their entire digital banking infrastructure. I had built that relationship personally, spending weekends at their data center in Charlotte troubleshooting integration, issues their own engineers could not solve. Their chief technology officer, a sharp woman named Vivian Fung, specifically requested me for every technical discussion. Dean speaks our language, she told Brandon once during a quarterly review. He does not just understand systems, he understands banking compliance. Brandon's father, the chief executive officer George Lattimore, barely understood what our infrastructure team did. Why would he when everything ran like clockwork under my watch? Brandon attended maybe 4 client meetings total in 6 years, always showing up at the end to shake hands and claim credit. Every morning I was logged into our monitoring systems by 6 in the morning, 2 hours before my shift technically started. I would review overnight alerts, check backup completion logs, and verify that all client-facing systems were performing within acceptable parameters. Between those daily reports, I was the person everyone called when something broke. Hector Vasquez, our senior network engineer, used to joke that my desk was the only place in the building where problems actually got solved, instead of just escalated to another meeting. Paige was 20 now, a junior at the university studying biomedical engineering. Brilliant kid. The kind of student who made the dean's list while working part-time at a research lab. She had inherited her mother's determination, and for better or worse, my stubbornness. But graduate school was expensive, and she had already taken on more student loans than I was comfortable carrying. The promotion to infrastructure director would have meant a $40,000 raise plus equity. It would be enough to help Paige finish her degree debt-free and start a proper savings account for the first time in my life. That promotion was supposed to change everything. The night after Brandon's rejection, I sat in my apartment staring at the ceiling. The television was on, but I was not watching it. Paige had texted me a photo of her latest lab results, something about protein folding analysis, with a string of excited emojis. I stared at that text for 20 minutes, thinking about the fact that my daughter was building a future, while her father was apparently not qualified to manage the systems he had been running successfully for 6 years. I made a decision before I fell asleep. It was not an angry decision. It was a calculated one. I logged into the monitoring system at exactly 8 in the morning the next morning. Not 6, not 7:15, but 8 sharp. For the first time in 6 years, I did not review the overnight alerts before the rest of the team arrived, did not check the backup logs, and did not verify client system performance. I opened my email, responded only to messages directly addressed to me, and began working on my assigned responsibilities. Specifically the compliance documentation that was technically my primary job function under my employment contract. When our monitoring dashboard started flashing amber alerts for the Meridian Bank staging environment around 9:30, I noted the alert, created a service ticket in our tracking system, and assigned it to the appropriate on-call engineer. Standard procedure, exactly as written in the operations manual that nobody besides me had ever opened. By 10:15, Hector Vasquez appeared at my desk looking confused. "Hey Dean, the Meridian staging environment is throwing memory errors. Same issue we had last quarter, the one where you reconfigured the heap allocation. You want to jump on that?" I looked up from the compliance spreadsheet I was updating. "I submitted a ticket, Hector. It should be in the queue." Hector scratched his head. "The queue? Dean, we usually jump on this stuff directly. Vivian's team has a load test scheduled for tomorrow, and if staging is down, they will have to postpone." "The ticket is in the system," I repeated. "The on-call engineer should be able to reference the runbook." Section 12 covers memory management for the banking platform. Hector stood there for a few seconds waiting for me to add something. 12 years we had worked together. He had started as a junior technician right around the same time I did. Worked his way up to senior engineer. Good man. The kind of colleague who would swap shifts with you when personal stuff came up. He knew me well enough to know something was off. "Everything okay, man?" "Just focusing on my core responsibilities," I said with a small smile. He walked away slowly, glancing back twice. The ticket sat in the queue for 3 hours before Nolan from the Tier 2 team picked it up. Nolan was a decent engineer for routine tasks, but the Meridian platform had custom configurations that I had built specifically for their compliance requirements. He spent 45 minutes staring at the logs before coming to my desk. "Dean, I cannot figure out this memory allocation issue. The configuration does not match anything in our standard documentation. Can you walk me through it?" "I would be happy to help, Nolan, but I am working on the system organization, Control 2 compliance audit documentation that is due to the financial regulators by Friday. Missing that deadline has serious compliance consequences. Have you checked the operations manual? Section 12, subsection C, covers the Meridian-specific memory configurations. Nolan's eyes went wide. That manual is like 400 pages long. It is well indexed, I assured him. There are screenshots and step-by-step instructions for every scenario. I wrote it specifically so anyone on the team could handle these situations independently. The staging environment stayed broken all day. At exactly 5 in the afternoon, I saved my work, shut down my laptop, and left the office. On the drive home, I called Paige. She picked up on the second ring. "Dad, is everything okay? You never call on a Tuesday." "Just wanted to hear your voice," I said. "How is the lab going?" She launched into a 10-minute explanation of her research project that I only half understood, but completely loved hearing. Something about using machine learning to predict protein structures. The excitement in her voice reminded me of Diane when she used to talk about her teaching. "Dad, you sound different," Paige said. "Did something happen at work?" I thought about how to explain workplace politics to a 20-year-old. I just realized my time is worth more than I have been charging for it. She laughed. "About time, old man. When I checked my work phone after I hung up, there were 23 missed calls and 41 unread messages." Vivian Fung's team had discovered the staging environment was still down and had escalated directly to Brandon Lattimore. Brandon had tried to escalate to Preston Miller, our shiny new infrastructure director, who had responded with a suggestion to reboot the servers, rebooting the Meridian banking platform. Without following the proper shutdown sequence, would have corrupted 3 days' worth of transaction logs and triggered an automatic regulatory audit. Hector had caught the order just in time and refused to execute it. I set the phone on my kitchen counter and made myself dinner for the first time in months, instead of eating takeout at my desk. By Wednesday morning, the situation had escalated significantly. I arrived at precisely 8 in the morning to find the office in visible disarray. Preston Miller was standing in the server room doorway with his laptop, looking like a college student who had wandered into the wrong exam room. 3 engineers were arguing about the Meridian memory configuration while a fourth was on the phone with what sounded like an increasingly irritated client. The staging environment was still down. Vivian Feng's team had postponed their load test, which meant the production migration scheduled for Saturday was now in jeopardy. A $22 million annual contract was hanging by a thread because nobody had read Section 12's C of a manual I had written 4 years ago. I settled at my desk and opened the compliance audit files. Brandon appeared at my workstation at 9:30 looking like he had not slept. His usual polished appearance was cracked, his tie crooked, and his shirt wrinkled. "Dean, we need to talk about the Meridian situation." "Of course, Brandon. How can I help you?" "Vivian Feng called me directly at 11 at night. She is threatening to invoke the contract's service level penalties if staging is not operational by end of business today. That is a $350,000 penalty per incident." "Do you understand what that means?" I nodded. "That sounds serious. Has Preston been able to diagnose the issue?" "He is the infrastructure director now. This would fall under his purview." Brandon's jaw tightened. "Preston is still getting up to speed on the Meridian systems. You know how complex they are." "I do," I agreed. "That is why I wrote a 400-page manual documenting every component, every configuration, and every troubleshooting procedure. It is on the shared drive." Brandon stared at me for a long moment. "I need you to fix this now." I turned my monitor so he could see the compliance spreadsheet. "I would, but this audit documentation is due to the financial regulators by Friday. Missing that deadline could trigger a formal review of our entire security posture." "Can you not do both?" Brandon asked, his voice rising. "Not without working outside my contracted hours," I said, "and I have decided to maintain a better work-life balance. My daughter has been telling me I work too much, and she is right." Brandon's hands were actually shaking. He turned and walked away without another word. That evening, I drove to Paige's campus. We sat on the floor of her tiny dorm room eating pad thai and talking about everything: her research, her roommate drama, and a boy in her organic chemistry class who kept asking her to study together. She showed me the lab where she worked, the whiteboard covered in molecular diagrams, and the microscope she had named Gerald. Diane called last week, Paige said quietly. She asked how you were doing. What did you tell Diane, I asked, that you were working yourself to death, same as always. She paused. But maybe I will have to update her about you now. I smiled. Maybe you will, sweetheart. On the drive home, I checked my voicemail, 67 missed calls. The Meridian staging environment was still down. Vivian Feng had emailed Brandon, Preston, and the Chief Executive Officer George Lattimore directly, copying her legal team. Preston had attempted a fix that morning using a standard configuration template. Not realizing the Meridian platform used custom parameters I had designed specifically for their compliance requirements. His fix had not only failed to resolve the memory issue, but it also disrupted the authentication protocols, meaning Meridian's quality assurance team could no longer access the staging environment at all. The voicemails ranged from confused to panicked. Hector's message was the most informative. Dean, I do not know what is going on with you, but this place is falling apart. Preston told the team to implement a standard failover, and it nearly wiped the transaction staging database. George Lattimore flew in from his vacation house in Hilton Head. There is an emergency meeting tomorrow morning, and your name was mentioned about 15 times. I turned off the phone and slept soundly. Thursday morning, I walked in at 8 in the morning to a building that felt like a hospital during a crisis. People were moving quickly, talking in hushed voices, and carrying laptops between conference rooms. Through the glass walls of Conference Room A, I could see George Lattimore, Brandon, Preston Miller, and on the large monitor, Vivian Feng's unmistakable face. I sat at my desk and opened the compliance files. It took 12 minutes for Brandon's assistant to appear. Dean, emergency meeting now. I gathered a notebook and walked calmly to the conference room. When I entered, 5 faces turned toward me with varying degrees of desperation. George Lattimore spoke first. He was 63, built like a former athlete with silver hair and the kind of commanding presence that made you understand how he had built a financial services company from nothing. Right now, he looked exhausted. Dean, thank goodness you are here. We need your help. I sat down and placed my notebook on the table. Of course, sir. What is going on? Vivian Feng's voice came through the speakers, precise and controlled the way banking executives are when they are furious. Mr. Vance, our staging environment has been down for 3 days. My team cannot perform the load testing required for Saturday's production migration. If this migration does not happen on schedule, we will miss our regulatory filing window, which exposes both Meridian and Ridgewater to federal penalties. I need to know if you can resolve this today. I nodded. Can you describe the specific failure mode your team is seeing? She outlined the symptoms: authentication failures, memory allocation errors, and cascading timeout issues across the staging cluster. I recognized the pattern immediately because I designed the system. Every failsafe, every redundancy layer, and every custom configuration. That is a cascading authentication failure triggered by mismatched memory allocation parameters, I said. The custom Meridian configuration uses a non-standard heap size to accommodate your compliance logging requirements. Someone appears to have applied a standard template over the custom settings, which broke the authentication handshake with your compliance monitoring layer. Preston Miller shifted uncomfortably. I was following best practices, he said. The standard template should have worked. I turned to him, not with anger, but with the patient tone you use when training a new private in the Army. The standard template works for standard configurations. Meridian's platform was purpose-built for their specific regulatory requirements. The custom parameters are documented in the Operations Manual, Section 12C, pages 287 through 315. There was a silence that reminded me of the moment in a military briefing room when everyone realizes the mission plan has a fatal flaw. Brandon leaned forward. Dean, what will it take to fix this today? I looked around the table. George Lattimore's face was a mask of controlled anxiety. Brandon looked like a man watching his career flash before his eyes. Preston was staring at his hands. On the screen, Vivian Feng waited with the calm patience of someone who holds a $22 million contract and knows exactly how much leverage she had. I can have staging operational within 2 hours, I said, and I can personally oversee the production migration Saturday to ensure it goes smoothly. But I should mention something first. The room went still. I have received an offer from Castle Land Defense Technologies, Senior Vice President of Infrastructure. They have been interested in my experience with secure financial systems for military contractor payroll platforms. George's eyes narrowed. You are leaving us? I have not accepted yet, I replied. I wanted to evaluate all my options before making a decision. Vivian Feng spoke from the screen. Mr. Lattimore, Dean is the reason we have maintained our contract with Ridgewater. If your organization cannot retain him, we will need to reassess whether Ridgewater is the right partner for our infrastructure needs. That was the kill shot. Meridian was not just $22 million a year. They were our reference client. Every other major banking contract we had won in the last 5 years had asked for case studies of our Meridian work that I had done. Lose Meridian and the dominoes would fall. George Lattimore stood up. Dean, let us talk privately. Brandon, handle the immediate technical issues with Preston's support. Vivian, we will have your staging environment operational within 2 hours. You have my personal guarantee. I followed George Lattimore to his office on the top floor. He closed the door and sat down heavily behind his desk. I am going to be direct with you, Dean. I clearly have not been paying close enough attention to how this department operates. Tell me what happened. So, I told him. Not emotionally, not as a complaint. I laid it out the way I deliver a mission brief in the military. 6 years of arriving early, staying late, maintaining every system, building every client relationship, and training every new hire. The promotion denied in favor of someone with 11 months of experience. The decision to simply perform my contracted duties and nothing more. The 3 days of chaos that followed, George listened without interrupting. When I finished, he rubbed his forehead. How much is Castle Land offering? I told him. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said something I did not expect. You remind me of my old operations chief when I was in the Marines, a staff sergeant named Morales. He ran everything, knew everything, and never got promoted because he was not political enough. One day he put in for a transfer, and our entire battalion went sideways within a week. It took us 6 months to recover. He looked at me. I am not going to let that happen here. I am creating a new position, Chief Technology Officer, reporting directly to me, not through Brandon. $185,000 base plus performance bonuses tied to client retention and system uptime. Full authority over all infrastructure decisions, hiring, architecture, and vendor relationships. And I will match the Castle Land equity offer. The offer was more than double my salary, enough to pay off Paige's student loans and fund her graduate school. But I did not accept immediately. That is generous, I said. But compensation is not the only issue. We must recognize technical expertise as leadership. The engineers who build our systems deserve clear career paths. I want to establish a technical track so senior engineers do not get stuck without management titles. George studied me. You are not just negotiating for yourself. I have 12 engineers who watched me get passed over, I said. If I accept and nothing changes for them, I prove the only way to get ahead is threatening to leave. That is not a system. It is a hostage negotiation. George laughed. Fair point. Draft a proposal, and I will review it. One more thing, I said. Preston Miller stays. He is not experienced, but he is not incompetent. He just needs mentoring, not a title he has not earned. Move him to a senior architect role under me. Give him 2 years to learn the infrastructure and then reassess. That is generous, George said. I shook my head. In the Army, we succeeded by putting the right people in the right positions and training them. If I start by getting someone fired, I build authority on fear. I would rather build it on competence. George stood. Fix the Meridian situation today. Think about the offer this weekend. I want your answer Monday. I went back downstairs and spent 2 hours restoring the Meridian staging environment. The fix itself took 40 minutes. The rest of the time I spent documenting exactly what had gone wrong, creating a simplified quick reference guide for the custom configurations, and walking Hector through the process so he could handle similar issues independently. When I logged into the migration platform Saturday morning, Hector was already online. Everything is green across the board, he typed. Your documentation is scary good, by the way. I actually read the whole section last night. First time for everything, I typed back. The migration went flawlessly. Vivian Feng sent an email to George Lattimore, personally commending the work. She did not mention Brandon or Preston. Sunday morning, Paige called. I was sitting on my apartment balcony, drinking coffee, watching the sunrise in a way I had not done in years because I was usually already logged in and working. "Dad, you sound relaxed." "That is suspicious," I laughed. "Can a man not just enjoy his coffee?" She was quiet for a moment. "Diane told me you got passed over for that promotion." "I am sorry, Dad, do not be," I said. "It turned into something better." She paused. "You know what I remember most about when you were deployed? I remember the times you would call and you sounded tired, but you would always ask about my day first. My soccer games, my classes, my friends. You always asked about me before you told me about you." I felt my throat tighten. "Your mother taught me that. She said the best thing a parent can give is their attention." Well, she was right, and lately you have been giving more of it. Whatever changed at work, keep doing it. Monday morning, I arrived at 7 in the morning. My choice this time. I walked into George's office. "I accept," I said. "With the conditions we discussed?" He nodded. "Welcome aboard, Chief." 4 months later, the transformation was tangible. I promoted Hector, hired 2 senior engineers, and established the technical leadership track. Preston Miller thrived as an architect, freed from pretending to understand systems he had never learned. He showed genuine talent for design, once mentored. The Meridian contract expanded to include their mobile platform, adding $8 million annually. Vivian Fung told George the expansion was due to her confidence in my leadership. Brandon and I stayed out of each other's lanes, and the company ran better than ever. 6 months later, I left the office at 5:30 on a Friday. Paige was graduating early. I had booked a hotel, invited Diane, and cleared my schedule, my first real vacation in 6 years. My phone buzzed in the parking lot. A text from Paige said her protein model worked, and Dr. Weaver thought it was publishable. She also found an apartment near grad school. I texted back congratulations and promised to help with the deposit. She replied, "Thanks, Dad, for everything, not just the money." For showing up finally. I sat in my car for a minute, thinking about the version of myself from 7 months ago. The one who arrived before dawn and left after dark, who answered every call and solved every crisis and never once demanded recognition. That man thought loyalty meant sacrifice without reward. He thought being indispensable meant being valued. It does not. Being indispensable just means they will use you until you break, then find someone cheaper. The moment I stopped being invisible and started being unavailable, they finally saw what they had been taking for granted. But here is what I learned that matters more than the promotion or the salary or the title. When I stopped giving every hour to a company that did not value my time, I got those hours back, and I spent them on the person who actually deserved them. The phone calls with Paige that I had been cutting short, the Sunday morning coffees I had been skipping, and the simple act of being present in my own life instead of maintaining someone else's. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is not working harder. It is stopping and letting the silence speak for itself.